Bonjour à tous et toutes et grand merci pour l'invitation de prendre la parole. Je prendrai juste 2 minutes pour insister sur nos remerciements. Comme vous savez, chaque année au Conseil, on reçoit autour de 13 000 demandes de subventions. Et pour sélectionner les meilleurs, il faut des chercheurs. Alors, grand merci à tout le monde qui a contribué au processus l'année passée et aussi qui a contribué à nos activités, soit toutes les consultations qu'on a fait, l'engagement et les visites qu'on a fait sur les campus à travers le pays. Alors, grand merci à tous et toutes. Comme vous savez, au Conseil, on a 200 membres de personnel. Et c'est vraiment grâce à vous que je pense que nous sommes sur la bonne piste. I'm thrilled to be here today with some of our 200 SSHRC colleagues, Brent, Tim, Christine, Jean-Marc, and we're just thrilled to be here. I want to also just insister sur nos remerciements à la Fédération. As you know, the Federation is the only lobby group that really works hard on behalf of all the social science and humanists across Canada, students, professors, and research partners. And I think it's really worth, when you think about the role that our one lobby group plays, I think it's good to think about that internationally. So I would encourage all of you to place what is happening in Canada in an international context. And then after that, I would invite you to think about how much more investment we all need to do in ourselves to really advance our cause. I remember back in the 1990s when I had the privilege of being involved with the Federation, we calculated that researchers in our fields, that we were as researchers, investing in ourselves in the promotion of our work about the equivalent of a breakfast in a restaurant a year. And we double that, we made it a lunch. Maybe it's time for a dinner, maybe it's time for a lot more, depending again on I think the extent to which we feel we can really articulate compellingly what we do and why we do it and the difference it makes to, I think, the 21st century. And that is in fact le sujet à l'ordre du jour aujourd'hui, la question des transformations. And I think this is so exciting in one sense, it's exhilarating to live in a time of deep transformation. I think all of us feel that Kuhnian paradigm shifting sense of what's going around us, but let's be frank as well, it's unnerving. And it's disquieting in many ways. And I think a lot of us, we hear often that in the transformations underway now, that the social science and humanities are not doing well. And we're real concerned that this is not going to go well. And I think all of us can think of examples. I can remember Antonia mentioned I got appointed in 2006. And I can remember one of the other leading figures in Ottawa at the time told me, wow, Chad, you've got the hardest job. That, you know, you can't come and talk to people about how, you know, your research is going to promises to cure cancer. You have no cool technologies to show anybody. Your job is really, really hard. I must say I've never felt that, and most days. And I must say, I want to talk a little bit today about one, indicating some examples that are kind of surprising, I think, in terms of success. I'm going to give 2 that are led by the Federation, and I think 2 that at SSHRC we're kind of proud of. And I'm going to say that success is not obvious, and I want to problematize that slightly. And then I want to suggest, in fact, that in the great transformations that are now underway, we are seeing the possibility for us to really make this century go in ways that really will do justice to, I think, the real value of the social science and humanities. And so that's where we're going to kind of lead in this. Comme vous avez sans doute remarqué, Gaffield and no PowerPoint. I hope this doesn't mean that I'm powerless and pointless today, but I just wanted to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to try to do it really quickly. Alors, bouclez vos ceintures de sécurité, because I'd really like to exchange with you and hear how you think collectively we can, in fact, take control of our destiny and move forward and develop this potential that I think is there, the signs we've seen, and really make this paradigm-shifting, transformational era go the way I think we can make it go. So, let me start très rapidement. 4 examples of success we have to explain. The first one is the Congress. It is not obvious to me, and it certainly wasn't obvious in the 1990s, that today we would have an event that would attract people from across Canada, in some extent internationally, be in the media, and really be a really significant event. Not to me obvious. Second example, the Big Thinking series, and especially the one that is held on Parliament Hill. Not obvious to me that we could invite leading researchers and that we could fill a large room like this, and in fact larger than this, on a regular basis. Not obvious to me. Not obvious to me, and that's exactly what happened. The third one is our initiative on imagining Canada's future. Over 2 years, 3 years now, with your participation, there have been roundtables across Canada, on campuses and all kinds of venues, thousands of people involved, all of whom devoted to thinking and reimagining Canada's future and thinking more specifically about the kinds of questions that we need to pose, the ways in which we can move forward. And that's not obvious to me that we could launch something like that and have so much participation. This year, for example, just this year, events in Moncton, Montreal, in Toronto, Kitchener, Regina, it's exciting and it's really interesting. I think that needs some explaining. How is that? Why are people so engaged and so committed to really imagining Canada's future and taking control of that? The third one has been mentioned a lot today in the sense that our fields are really hold the hope in terms of making the digital age go well, work for the benefit of humanity. And that's kind of interesting, because when, the whole computerization, when that all started, it seemed like it was just the technology. And we have successfully articulated a vision in which digital technologies, digital content, data, digital literacies, a very robust sense, and people, I think, now recognize that, in fact, if the potential of that in a good way is going to be realized for the benefit of society, that our fields are going to be so important. And for example, big data. We would not have magazine covers about this, shows about this, if the data involved in that were not about human thought and behavior. If it were big data in the sense of colliding particles or many other kinds of, we would not be having public discussion. Why that is so interesting and so important, I think, in terms of public consciousness, is that it's data about people, about human thought and behavior. And that's why it feels like digital humanities and others have been so interesting, and its spatial analysis, on, and our fields are central to that. So, my argument today is that I think within the transformations that we can see, that the social sciences and humanities are indeed moving to center stage. So, we have a big responsibility. We have a responsibility to try to make this go in a positive way, in a way that benefits societies. Secondly, I think it's urgent. I think it's urgent that we take and accept that responsibility, which I think we've been doing, as my example suggests. I think it is difficult at times, no doubt about it, but I think it falls to us. So, what are some paths forward? I'm just going to try to sketch out a few. When I arrived at SSHRC, I realized that one of the questions we had to answer in a crisp way, what are the social sciences and humanities? And the answer couldn't be, well, it's history and English and sociology. Is that like, really? Or it couldn't be. We sometimes say, oh, that's where you learn critical thinking, that's where you learn how to analyze, that's where you learn. No, because other fields do that too. And I think it was our ability to say, what are the social science and humanities? We're the fields that focus on people. Human thought and behavior in the past and present. We're trying to get better understandings of people. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's been really key, is because having better understandings of people is having a huge impact across society. We give the example this morning of what's happening in schools, learning, how we have really redefined how we think about learning. We've gone from a teaching push notion to a learning notion. And why is that? Because we've started to focus and pose questions and do a much better job of understanding how people learn. For 200 years, we built school systems without really ever worrying much about that. And in the last number of decades we're getting better and better. We've got a long way to go, but it's having a huge impact. I would say this runs across society, and I want to start with l'exemple du conseil. How you run an organization is a topic of the social sciences and humanities. So we said, if there is real importance in terms of our fields, we should be able to benefit from that in terms of how we think about running SSHRC. And we got together, and many people in this room contributed to this, from governance, management, what our program architecture looks like. We engaged, we thought this through, we looked at the literature, and we're going to continue doing this with you. But our mission in life is clear to say, if you're going to run something and it benefit from our research, and try to be an exemplar of how one does this. The literature also says how, if SSHRC is going to be a successful organization, we have to learn how to work with others. All the research says that. So we adopted a new stance and started to engage with our colleagues. And I'm just thrilled that my former colleague Suzanne Fortier est ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Et on a passé des belles années ensemble, on travaille ensemble, ce qu'on a dit shoulder to shoulder. And we connected across. We said that we have a role to play, but we do it in a T-shaped way that's connected to a horizontal whole that's bigger than us. Our SSHRC leaders, for example, working closely with the Fédération, on and on. We also embraced the challenge of telling our story, impact, and it was great to hear Lisa's report and how the Fédération is taking that seriously. Let's face it, for years we didn't worry about that. We took for granted we were good. History's wonderful. I don't have to explain to you why it's good. It's good. That's it. Well, it turns out, no. It turns out that we have to tell the story, and we have to be willing to embrace that challenge. And we're doing a lot better. It never made sense for us not to get into that, because after all, when you think about that, in every other walk of life we ask that. We think about, grading, measurement, evaluation. We said initially, oh, way too complex. I can't measure that. But our whole academic culture is based on measurement evaluation. We call it grading, but we won't let each other do anything without measurement evaluation, right? So obviously we can, we're doing this and we're getting better and better at it. At SSHRC, we began to conceptualize this in three ways. One was this notion of our graduates. The impact that we had in terms of the study of the social sciences and humanities. We were late to that as a community. We were a little late to that. We're still paying the price on that. But we now getting much better data. We're following people and so on, and we're getting better and better. And I think we're going to quickly, and you can already see it, we're starting to turn that around. And I think we're getting much better in terms of telling that story. We're also, as I suggested earlier, getting better in terms of that second category of insights about human thought and behavior in the past and present. I think we're getting much better about that. I think we should be humble about how little really focus has been on understanding people until recent decades. I can remember when I started in history, and you could pick any field, and it would be possible during your PhD comprehensives to basically read every study done on that field. It was possible. It was a definable amount, and it wasn't that many. I remember in books on great historians or books on historians, you know, we could name them even. You know, there weren't that many of them. You know, great Canadian historians, Harold Innes, for example, a great scholar. The amount of evidence he looked at for all his books, if put it in paper, would be about that high. That was it. So I think we're really on an era in which we're recognizing, in fact, we're just starting to scratch the surface about insights about people, and I think it's an exciting time. The third one is the link in terms of trying to make a better world. And you know, I think we had, some false dichotomies in terms of the intrinsic value of understanding and knowledge and the extrinsic value, and we developed some unfortunate dichotomies in terms of pure and implied and so on. And now I think we've reconceptualized that. We say, you know, the intrinsic value about knowing about all aspects of the past and present is the foundation upon which we can make, in expected and unexpected ways, contributions to making a better future. And I think we've gotten over, and you know, you've heard me use the example of September 10th, 2001. You know, on September 10th, 2001, we're funding studies, 14th century Islamic world, on and on. And at the time, oh, very pure. Well, as you know, the next day, they were the most sought after, the most applied people, and they hadn't changed anything. Those scholars hadn't changed what they were doing. So I think we're really getting a much more sophisticated notion, and we're moving beyond the idea of focusing on the headlines today, headlines tomorrow, and so on, and getting a much more robust sense of how, in fact, better understandings can help us in all kinds of ways. I think the good news is, un peu inattendu, that our ways of thinking, the epistemologies, and in fact, a lot of our teaching, the way we engage students and so on, fits with a lot of the deep transformations, that reimagining of scholarship that we're experiencing now. And what I think is really interesting is that the deep conceptual changes that are driving the digital age resonate with our fields. And that helps explain something that, again, was unexpected, I think, is the rise of fields like digital humanities, which again, I think is worth pausing on. So what's happening? Well, I think it's how our fields link to that redefinition of teaching, going from a broadcast model to engagement model. I would say many of our fields, it's always been based on an engagement model. We've never been good on the regurgitation, that transmission of knowledge kind of model. We've never liked that. We've always wanted to engage our students, force them to write interpretive essays, force them to come to grips with text and on and on. And I think it helps explain how I think we're being expected to lead. We've never wanted our students to tell them what to think. We wanted to help them learn how to think and different strategies there. And I think that it resonates well with us. So I would say that this and many other things, we could go on and talk about this, is that it really does explain, I think, what's happening is that slowly but surely, the social science and humanities, because of our focus on human thought and behavior, are in fact moving to center stage and becoming and really having the burden, in essence, of making the 21st century go well. Expectations, I think, are getting higher and higher. The number of times, for example, that it looks like the world's challenges today are being increasingly, we're being turned to. Those of you who have seen Horizon 2020, the European research plan, 80 billion euro over the next number of years, and their societal challenges, and how they emphasize a lot that all of them, in terms of addressing them, are not going to go well without the social sciences and humanities, and we're being asked to step up to the plate. And it was interesting in our own effort in terms of imagining Canada's future, there's no doubt that all the major issues that people see out there, the kinds of questions our fields are really at the heart of it. Clearly, though, we have a lot of work to do. I think living in a transformational Kuhnian paradigm shifting period, deep conceptual changes, the redefinition of teaching, the redefinition of advancing knowledge and understanding, how do we make a better world? All of those things now I think are fundamentally being redefined and with expectations of us. It's difficult. The pressures on us I think are significant. I'm unaware of any institution, any group that feels comfortable right now. I think all of us feel that. My sense, though, is that we can are playing a major role in this. We're not victims. I think we can, in fact, make things go much better, and I think the expectations are there. So how to move forward? Well, I think one strategy is clear in terms of embracing the changing ways of thinking and having that, allowing that to be enabled by some of the new technologies, for example. One is I think we got to focus on removing obstacles to the emergence of a better future and that opening doors. And I think that's what we've done, for example, with our program architecture renewal. We've tried to step back and really say, can we remove obstacles? Can we open doors? Can we do our best to try to embrace this changing world of research for the benefit, I think, of all of us on campus and beyond. So I want to close with, I think, a claim for which we have some evidence, but which is clearly something that's in emergence at best. And that is the claim that the 21st century is going to become distinguished as the century when we really began to take seriously across societies around the world the challenge of understanding human thought and behavior in the past and present, and using that to make a better future. Thank you very much, et je suis tout à fait ouvert à vos questions, vos commentaires. Merci beaucoup. Whatever. Or maybe we won't take questions.
Thank you, Chad. Do we have any questions for Dr. Gaffield? I'm sure. Just to the podium, and if you could just identify yourself.
You cut me off whenever you want.
Yes, I'm Linda Silva. I'm from the Université de Montréal.
Oui.
Following on our discussion before lunch, I was just wondering if researchers will find it harder to get projects funded if they're on big data, because the line between what is computer science and what is not, will that be harder to establish? And so will we have to be juggled between NSERC and SSHRC?
There's two phenomena which are really interesting. One is that you may have noticed the number of scholars formed in other fields, computer science and other fields, that are now in the world of social science, humanities, and digital. It's interesting. Digital humanities, for example, has a number of scholars, and it turns out that their formation was in the natural sciences and engineering. So that's interesting. And to me, that poses questions about, have we embraced the notion that words and numbers are semiotically both representations, and have we made a false distinction that's not really helpful anymore, and can we think that through in interesting ways? The good news is, and it's great that Suzanne Fortier is here, because, for example, in our Digging into Data initiative internationally, NSERC and SSHRC were partners in that, and so it's seamless. Do we have some work to do across the granting councils in terms of that T-shaped, in other words, that specificity in that? Absolutely. Is it a paradigm shifting shift? Absolutely, because as you know, for basically 20th century for sure, the notion was that it was additive. It was history, it was philosophy, poli-sci, science, biology, and so on. It was additive, and you added that all up, and that was all the ways of knowing it was fine. And now we know it's not like that. And so what does that look like? The metaphor that jumps to my mind is T-shaped. There are other ones, of course. But it's clear that just as in all our institutions everywhere, we're having to embrace a kind of a fundamentally different way of thinking about how you advance knowledge, how you build understanding, in fact, how you learn. It has some big implications for campus, has big implications for granting councils. It's a work in progress. Are we there yet? No, but we're committed to it.
Hi, Elspeth Eman, History Department here at McGill. And I just wonder if I could ask you perhaps to take off your shirt hat for a second and put on your history hat. And I think I'm old enough to remember that we really didn't do a very good job of, selling history in the old days. But the new ways that things get sold seems to be because it's new. And often the people making these claims, even in history departments, seem a little historically tone deaf. Like they're really geared towards speaking to contemporary issues, realities, concerns. And I wonder if you've seen the history profession, like history as a body of knowledge or way of approaching things changing in ways that worries you at all in this new, because it's new mode.
Right. I think there's no doubt that we went through a period, particularly in the late 20th century, when old became like a bad word and everything wanted to be presented. I think we're getting a little more balance there. One of the things that I've enjoyed doing at SSHRC is to pull out from SSHRC's own history evidence and documents about how we were grappling with issues at that time and so on. There's a great new book I'd recommend by Kevin Key's colleague at Brock University, John Bonnet, it's a re-examination of Harold Innis, and he connects Harold Innis's thinking to subsequent events in the 20th century in terms of conceptual changes and so on. So my sense is that we're getting to a better balance there, and it's not compelling anymore, I don't think, to just say, oh, here's my new shiny thing. I think there's a lot of skepticism, and people want to know what's the foundation for that, and how is it substantively going to move us ahead? So my hope, at least, is that the shiny is fading, and we're back to and realizing that there are enduring values. The digital age, for example, at one level allows us to do perhaps more efficiently and so on what we've always done and will continue doing, and then we've got to focus on what are the paradigm shifting parts of that. And there definitely are. There's no doubt about it. Ray Seaman's project on thinking about new knowledge environments instead of just a book, and all kinds of really deep neuroplasticity, for example, is really interesting in terms of, no one today can say, oh, I just sit in front of my computer and it's just like in the old days. Turns out it's not. There's a lot of research on that now as well. So my sense, at least, is that we're getting a more balanced view. I would argue that makes our fields even more important, because we realize that the human aspect of all of this is really at the heart of it. And I think, again, the responsibility on us to actively try to play a role in that, I think, is clé aussi. Merci beaucoup. OK. Merci beaucoup. Thank you all.